And they say it's if you're in a battle, it's much better to have a pack of sheep led by a lion than a pride of lions led by a sheep. And Mason Weaver is not sheepish. So make him welcome and hear his heart.
Thank you all. Appreciate it very much. It's really an honor to be here, especially for this service. This is the one I've been waiting for, folks. They told me I can just cut loose right now. You know, we are a family. And this weekend was my family reunion. And the part of my family I had not seen in 60 years. I'm the oldest. I'm the firstborn son. I'm the oldest cousin. I'm the oldest uncle. I have not seen these people for 60 years. I was supposed to go to the reunion this weekend until you guys called me. And I called them up and said, the first thing your oldest cousin is going to teach you is family responsibility. My family is my wife and my children. My family is serving them and working with them. So I will not be able to make your reunion because I have to work in what I'm called to do. Today I want to talk about Gideon. Gideon shows the plan. Gideon shows the plan. And we're going to talk about how he suffers through and maintains and comes out victoriously. But we're going to start with the family. We're going to start with the family that God has set aside for us to watch and look at and study and organize and understand. So, you know, you probably notice all weekends I come out on stage and I bring out my notes. And I put them down, and most of you notice I never look at them again because God takes away what I planned on saying in the first place and has his own, and I've learned to obey that. So I'm going to start with things we already know. Abraham was given a promise by God through his wife Sarah, or Sarai. And he laughed. I'm having a baby at 99 years old. And his wife said, well, you know, we always try to help God out. God gives us a vision, and we try to make it fit in our own little small expectations and abilities. And when Sarah and Abraham heard that they're supposed to have a baby, Sarah figured that God really meant Abraham and some little cutie pie around the corner. I had a woman tell me once, my husband just can't love me like he used to. He's getting old. I said, if you think he's getting old, bring home a 20-year-old and see. So Sarah forced, well, she didn't probably force him that much. I'm sorry, I said that out loud. Abraham and Hagar had Ishmael outside of what God told them to do, trying to help God along a little bit. So now you have the firstborn was not from Sarah. The firstborn of promise and inheritance was not from Sarah. Abraham and Sarah then had Isaac, and now you have a split family, and now you have a 1,000-year-long family feud in the Middle East right now. Everybody's going after their daddy's inheritance. You want to know what's going on in the Middle East? It is a family feud. It is both sons of Abraham fighting over daddy's inheritance. It will not end until a kingsman redeemer comes and make what looks like peace to them. But something else happened, though. I discovered this morning something else. In Genesis chapter 25, verse 1 through 4, Abraham had a second family after Sarah died. And his children from this family included Midian, which became the Midianites. The Midianites were the tribe that became a thorn in the side of Israel as long as they existed. The Midianites were the people that Joseph was sold to and sold Joseph into Egypt. It was the Midianites that provided the catalyst to get Joseph into Egypt. And then 430 years, the captivity, they come out and they go into the wilderness. I'm not going to tell you the whole story. Moses was placed in Pharaoh's home because someone had to go and tell Pharaoh to let the people go. It's like me sending you to the White House to tell the president to let the people go. How can I get into the White House? How can I get past security? How can I get past all the armed guards to get to President Barack Hussein Obama and say to him, let God said anything unless I was a relative or a close, well-known advisor. So they put Moses in the house of Pharaoh so that when he showed up at the gates to tell Pharaoh what God had said, the guard said, okay, Moses, son of Pharaoh, come on in. And so Moses was able to go in and tell Pharaoh that. And eventually, you know the story. Eventually, they were let free. And they went out to the desert. And they were led by God every step of the way. The Red Sea split. They had the tower of smoke and a pillar of fire, or vice versa, leading them through the desert. Every day they got the water from the rock. Every day, except the Sabbath, they got food from the sky. Every day they saw their shoes not wear out. Every day they saw their clothes not wear out. Every day they saw God give them victory after victory after victory. And you did not have to tell those folks that God was a miracle-working God. You didn't have to tell them that God was on their side. You didn't have to tell them that God would provide for them the next day. They saw for 40 years God providing every day. And guess what? So did the people around them. So did the sons of Midianites. So did the sons of Isaac, of Ishmael. They saw God delivering those strange people that had been gone 420 years, 30 years. Finally, they get to the Jordan River, and they are promised the promised land. You all have the promise of God deep in your heart, and you know what the promise is. You know what your goals are. You know where you're going. He has put that promise in you. He's given you a land. He's given you territory. He's given you possessions. But when you go to get those possessions, when you go to get what God has given you, somebody else already have it. And guess what? If God set aside something for you, it's the best. It's the most desirable. If God set aside something, and you, his people, if he set aside it for you, it is the very best out there. And guess what? Everybody else wants the best. So why would you be surprised? You've been gone 430 years from the promised land that God has given you and laid aside for you. Why would you be surprised to get there and find giants have the land? Because for 430 years, all the baddest dudes out there have been fighting for that land. And the biggest, baddest, toughest guys now have that land. And you should not be surprised you come up to claim what God has for you to find giants occupying the promise God has for you. You should not be, but after 40 years of seeing what God has done for you, you shouldn't be hesitant by going and knock on that door and say, give me my stuff. But we're scared because what we see with our eyes doesn't give you what God has given you in your heart, or we see this. And we have now the children of Israel, we have the people under God's control for 40 years, and those children know who God is. They get into the promised land, and they understand what God has done for them, and then they go out and conquer. And the people of God is kicking down doors and taking no names. And all the folks around see this, and they get to Jericho, this big old tall walled city. And Rahab tells the spies, it's very interesting, she tells the spies, the men of the city have seen what you've done in other cities. They have seen the destruction of our neighbors. She said the men of the city know, not believe, not think, the men know that you serve the true and living God. But they still going to fight you. They have seen everybody come up against you is utterly destroyed. They even know your God is the real God, and they still going to come against you. That is my definition of stupidity. When you see, sometimes people will know. You will go and show this plan to folks, and they know it's right. They know it works. They have seen you. I have friends of mine that have seen me for 30 years do what I'm doing. And they're still broke and miserable and scared and doubtful that it works. You can't argue with that. You got to move on. And they conquer. And by the way, God told them, in most cases in the Bible, the miracle of God is you showing up and paying attention. And watch God do the miracle in your face as a testimony to what he does. He told them to walk, because faith is the verb. Be quiet and walk and pay attention and watch what I'm going to do based on my promise to you. He's telling you to do the same thing. Be quiet, get up, go out there and collect what I've told you to collect. Because right now, folks, we have some stuff coming our way that you had better be trained up for, motivated for, encouraged for, to come up against, and the walls will fall down at your feet when you are walking, when you're active and doing what you're told to do. The people of Israel go out and they conquer Jerusalem and everybody else around them, but the children raised up by the folks that came through the wilderness, the children who grew up in the promised land, who didn't see the pillar of smoke and the tower of fire, who didn't see the water from the rock, who didn't see the manna from the sky, who didn't see their shoes not wear out, who didn't see their clothes not wear out, who didn't see God walking before them every day and the miracles every day, those children who sat in the promised land, who sat in the midst of what God had provided, they didn't know about that. They said, oh, Grandpa talking about God and some pillar of fire. Grandpa getting old. He getting senile. He's talking about the manna from the sky every day. Grandpa's talking about we have shoes that don't wear out. Grandpa and Grandma sure is getting old. Let's go party with Baal. And they go after Baal. See, Baal's a cool God. Baal is cool. You can have all kind of fun. You can visualize world peace. You can save the environment. You can do all kind of stuff because Baal is cool. And the children went after Baal, and God, as God always do, will back off. He'll back off. Until you decide who you're going to serve, he will back off and let you do your thing. You can mix God in with it if you want to. You can be lukewarm and part God and part not God. You can play with it if you want to. But God's only going to bless you when you are paying attention and you're obedient and you're diligent and you're faithful and you're walking unhesitantly and claiming him everywhere you go. And he waited. And the children of Israel, in Judges chapter 2 through 4, here we have now, guess who was oppressing Israel? The Midianites. Them other kids Abraham had. That broken family Abraham had. What would we have been now if Abraham had just stayed with Sarah? Where would we be right now? The children that Abraham had outside of Sarah is who is oppressing Israel and always have oppressed Israel. That's the problem. So now you have the Midianites that have them in captivity. Every time they go against God, they go into captivity. So now they're in captivity again, and they stayed in captivity until they remembered what their grandfather said about this God that kept them through the wilderness. They remember what grandfather said about this God that provided everything they needed if they just had faith. This God who gave them food. Right now they're starving. Gideon is in a wine vat. It's a hole in the ground trying to get wheat to blow through to the shaft and get out. How do you get wind to blow in a hole in the ground? He's hiding the wheat from the Midianites that will steal everything they have. So he's hiding the wheat in a hole. And the angel comes to him and calls him a man of valor. How could you be a man of valor? You hide in a hole. Because God calls you for what you're going to be, not for what you are. And he called him a man of valor. And you can read through this chapter 2 through 6. The people of God go into slavery when they stop worshiping God. And they stay in slavery until they begin to worship God. And they come out of slavery praising God's name. And when they use their children, forget about God and go back to Baal, they go into slavery until they stop worshiping Baal and go back to worshiping God. In and out, chapter 2 to chapter 6. It is dizzying. You'd be dizzy reading how many times they go into captivity, out of captivity, into captivity, out of captivity. Hey, notice that I'm black? Black history. Black folks came here worshiping every god you can think of, calling the sun god, moon god, river god, trees and birds and everything you can think of. We stayed slaves in the worst conditions you can think of for 230 years until we began to sing those Negro spirituals in the fields and calling on the name of the Lord and having church service every Sunday morning, and everything we did was in God's grace, by the grace of God. And then a Christian movement began by the Quaker Church and the Western Church and Reverend Harriet Beecher Stowe and Minister John Brown and Reverend Harriet Tubman, and a Christian movement set up the Underground Railroad and the abolitionists, and God's people once again came out of captivity praising God. You will never see in the Bible where the people of God go into captivity while they're worshiping God. You will never see any person, any nation, any family go into slavery, captivity, and oppression while they're worshiping God. You got to stop worshiping God before the enemy can overtake you. And that's why the enemy wants you to stop speaking the word of God. At work, in government, they want you to be quiet. We don't talk about God here. They want you to silence because the word of God is too powerful. They cannot stand up against it. They cannot resist it. The only power they have is to get you to stop talking about it. And when take him out of your classrooms, matter of fact, force you to preach nonsense you can't talk about homosexuality in the pulpit. You got to decide if you're going to embarrass God or man. And God's going to sit back and wait. Gideon 13 times doubted God. Well, I tell you what, God, if you're really God, let the sheepskin be wet and the ground be dry. Oh, okay, but let me try one more thing. Don't get mad now, God. Let's reverse it. Let the ground be wet and the sheepskin be dry. If 13 times, if, and God said, I got a job for you. Go tell these people to tear down that doggone altar. Do what, God? Do you know how bad the Midianites are, God? He understood who God was now, so he went at night to do it because God didn't really mean before daylight. He didn't mean daylight. And he tore down the altar, and God gave Gideon a plan. It was a plan only given to Gideon. God only gives the vision to one person, never the nation, never the family. And Gideon had this plan for freedom. He had been pleading and praying for freedom for him, for his family, and for his nation, his people. And God gave him a plan. I'm going to free you, God. You got to do this, this, and this. And no one got up at Gideon. And what happened, folks, the people saw God in Gideon. He was a changed man. This coward in the wine vat went and tore down the altar. This coward in the wine vat went before the Midianites and said, this is going to end. This coward, they knew he was a coward. They knew he was scary. They saw valor in him because God had put the fire in him. And he led 25,000 farmers with pitchforks against 135,000 trained enemy troops. 25,000. And God said, let me say, you got 25,000 men, farmers, and me against 135,000 enemy troops. That don't seem fair. So I tell you what, leave those pesky swords and stuff at home. But first, we're going to eliminate all the folks who don't really belong in your downline. You know, they just join up for the party. They join up because they like to shoot. They join up because they think you're strong. They join up because they like your charisma. But we're going to take them down to the water. We're going to have them drink. Watch them, Gideon. Those who get down on all four like a dog, put their head down to the water and not watching and keep looking, thank them, love them, and send them home. But those who get down on one knee and put their hands in that water and bring up their face and they keep alert, they keep looking, they keep watching, that's your downline. You don't need 25,000. You need 300. And number 3 sound familiar to you? You need 300. And he got 300 men. God said, 300 men and me against 135,000 trained enemy troops. Still don't seem fair, Gideon. I don't know. Maybe let them keep those pesky swords and shields and spears at home. They're getting away. And can you imagine a farmer going up against a trained soldier, and all you got is the pitchfork, they got an AK-47, and your commander says, well, keep the pitchfork at home. We don't need that on this battlefield. Can you imagine how much confidence you must have in that commander to do that? They were a family. Gideon's army of 300 farmers found the enemy right where they wanted them, in the darkness. And the enemy troops had encamped around getting ready to rise up and put down this crazy rebellion that Gideon was trying to form. This enemy has sat down and settled in and said, tomorrow we're going to take care of this problem, those crazy Christians over there trying to worship God. How much who God is? And Gideon had them right where he wanted them, in the darkness. And he told those soldiers, I want you to encircle the enemy camp on the hills around them. Encircle them. And take a lantern with you and take a bugle with you. The lantern is in case they're blind and can't see you. And the bugle is in case they're deaf and can't hear. You're going to stand there on the hillside. You're going to tell the enemy where you are. I go out and say, I'm a Christian with an attitude in case somebody wants to find a Christian to fool with. Fool with me. You have to be bold enough to trust God to protect you. And they stood there. Can you imagine how far apart you have to be for 300 men to encircle 135,000 men? You got to be pretty far apart. And you standing there with no sword. You saying, Gideon said God talked to him. He didn't talk to me. I ain't heard this thing here. And this is kind of crazy. I don't understand. Now Gideon said, leave my sword at home, my shield at home, my pitchfork at home. And he got me standing out here by myself in the woods out here. And they got lions and they got everything else out here. And my kids are at home. I got to go to school in a minute. If any man, this is why he only took 300. This is why he qualified him. If any man had not stood his ground and broke his lantern, had any man decided that he had to go and take care of something else or doubted God had spoke to Gideon because God didn't talk to them yet, the enemy would have not seen a circle of light. You guys like circles, I understand, right? Wouldn't have seen a circle of light. They would have came out the tent. They would have seen a gap of darkness. Don't forget, they're the army of darkness. They would have seen a gap, and they would have said, that's the way of escape. Let's go this way. But when they saw the circle of lights, by the way, that lantern was probably a division battle lantern. The trumpet was probably a division standard bearer's trumpet. And so when they heard the trumpets playing, they thought, more than likely, it's not biblical, but I'm thinking they thought it was 300 divisions surrounding them. They thought they saw 300 division standard bearers. They said, how did Gideon get 300,000 divisions against us? We have to get busy. And they came out of those tents in the darkness. In the darkness. And they came out of the tents with their swords drawn, expecting to be attacked by 300 divisions. And they started bumping to each other at night. As they run around, bumping to each other at night. And when they bumped into each other, they hit each other with the swords. And they cut each other apart. And they slashed each other all night long. God's plan is for you to watch the enemy destroy himself. He would have saved up the wealth of the enemy for the saved. And Gideon, usually every miracle in the Bible requires you to show up and watch. Watch the victory. The walls of Jericho fell down in front of them. The Red Sea split before them. They didn't get buckets and clean it out, get rags and dry up the Red Sea. He just said, stand here and watch this. Show you who God is. Stand here and watch this. The Midianites, the baddest army in the neighborhood, were killing each other. Gideon and his army chased them and killed them until they got tired of killing them. They got tired of killing them. That's your God. When you finally turn yourself to the promise you have, God has placed in your heart this kingdom he has for you. You call it levels. You call it emerald. You call it diamond. But God has placed in your heart. It is burning and pumping with every beat of your heart. And you know it's there. He has set up before you leaders that you have recognized has been led by God by the path they have taken. You have seen it clearly. You understand it. And now we're at a place in our country's history where the Midianites are controlling everything we do. We can't even breathe as Christians anymore. They're attacking every social fabric. They're looking at your family like it belongs to them. They're telling you things like, we rule over you. And you know there's going to have to be a struggle to be free again. And Judges chapter 2, So chapter 6 tells you that struggle cannot happen until you turn your face back to God. It cannot happen. You can stand there and be frustrated. You can be scared. You can be encouraged. You can be whatever you want to be, but unless you are also on your knees before your God and stand silent to listen for the response from God. And when God calls you, folks, it will not be fun. God does not have to call you for a party. I had someone tell me, God called me for the choir. No, he didn't. You like to sing. You like to sing. God called you to clean the church up. He's not trying to be your friend. He's trying to be your God. But you must accept him. And when you accept him, the world's going to show you all the dangers of accepting God. You got 6,000 years of God keeping his word. 6,000 years of God keeping every promise to nations, to families, and individuals. And every time we face God's truth, we get scared. And all miracles are. Every miracle in the Bible is just God keeping his word. And we call it a miracle. Wow, God kept his word. That's a miracle. Everyone. But when you face the problem, it's going to look like Goliath. It's going to look like a giant. It's going to look like nobody can defeat it. But all it takes is one little boy and a couple of stones and the word of God. And that Goliath standing in front of you will fall to your feet in a cloud of dust. Do you know why David took 5 stones? You read later on in Kings, you find out that Goliath had 4 brothers. I got some for your brothers too, just in case they want to make something out of this. Folks, we are put here for this purpose. It's time for us to take a deep breath, understand the call of God, the history, what he's done for his people. Understand that we have been on our knees long enough. God has heard us. He has sent us through 50 years of the wilderness. We have seen the miracles. We have seen the testimony. We understand God is ordering our steps. We must now have that faith that Gideon had and the 300 army and stood around him. We now must all go out now and get our 300 and train them up in faith, not in weaponry, in faith, and prepare ourselves to stand in front of the people of God and proclaim the miracle is going to happen and watch the walls come tumbling down. If we do this system is made for this. We have been provided. We have been watching this nation. 80 years sometimes they prayed in captivity for victory. 40 years, 7 years. We have turned our back on God for a generation. We've allowed the ungodly to raise our kids and educate our children. We've allowed the ungodly to rule us and put judges over us. We've allowed the ungodly to criticize and ridicule our God in front of us. They have told us we must back down in the face of their God. They have challenged us to act like we believe God or act like we believe them. And your God is sitting back waiting. Your God is sitting back saying, let me know when you had enough. Let me know when you decide that you're going to stand for me. I'm not going to bless you when you're doing half me and half Baal. You got to decide. You got a bucket of water up on this floor, 2 buckets of water. One is ice cold, freezing. The other is boiling, scalding hot. And you put a foot in each one of them, you're on average. You feel comfortable on average. And God's not a God of average. He wants all the glory. He wants all the honor. He wants all the credit. I was with President Aristide in the White House in Haiti right before he died, right before he got thrown out of office. I'm sitting there talking to this guy about something we're doing there, and he says to me, Mason, why is it that America and Haiti was founded in the same decade, and America became the strongest country, and we became the weakest country? Now, folks, some of you know me. Don't ask me a question you don't want to answer. Don't ask me, because I think you really want to know the answer. And I said, President Aristide, you are a trained Jesuit priest. And you think you're president. But what you are is a trained Jesuit priest. what happened in Haiti when the people of America won their freedom, their leaders dropped to their knees and thanked God Almighty for the victory. And in Haiti, when your people miraculously, African slaves defeated Spain, folks. African slaves rebelled and threw the Spaniards out of the country. And they dropped to their knees and they thanked voodoo. They thanked voodoo. And I said, Mr. President, you cannot find a voodoo nation, a voodoo state, a voodoo family prospering until you, as a Jesuit priest, decide which God you're going to serve. Could be a politician trying to make everybody happy. When you decide who you're going to serve and let your people know you're going to serve them, your country will stay the brokest country in this hemisphere. You will stay impoverished for no reason. And they ran him out of office because God was waiting. God will not bless you and Satan get the credit. Your God requires you to act like you believe him. You cannot receive what God desires for you until you achieve what God requires of you. God bless you. See you at the top.